So I'm going to start on time this time. Since I'm doing these fairly regularly, it's my intention to open up the questions at the start. And then when we don't have questions, I have a theme. And the theme for this one would be Blooming Espresso. So the idea is that each time I do this, it'll probably be every 2 weeks because I'll just alternate time zones. So I'll do blooming for 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks, I'll probably do the allongé and just try and do the ones that are the hardest ones to dial in. So we could, of course, just do default and talk about that. I don't know on here if everyone's an existing customer or how many people are new to Decent. Let me turn on the chat. If you want to just indicate, let's see if I can do that. Can you just post, if you're new to Decent, be great if you just let us know so we don't go too heavy technical. So if you hit chat in Zoom, you'll open a little chat window and you can type stuff in there. And that's a nice way to add questions to the stack without interrupting the conversation. Okay, so far everyone is existing. So David and Ginny are about to get their machine. I'm going to dim the tablet because one of the things we notice is the brightness to our eyes is great, but for a camera, it blows it out. So it's settings, app, then screen brightness. That also allows me to do that. So that's not a little brighter. That's pretty good.
Mm.
Yeah. That's pretty,
yeah, it looks good.
Pretty readable. Because we're going to be looking at those charts when we make some shots. Okay, so I'm going to just start off with basic introduction of what the blooming espresso is, why it's interesting, and then we're going to try and make one. But before I do that, anyone have any questions? It's open season before.
What's the difference between a blooming espresso and a allongé?
Okay, so a blooming espresso is just a normal espresso, but with a hole in it. So that hole is a big pause. So with a normal espresso, you got your medium to dark roast, and you can put water in during pre-infusion, and those beans are set to give off their flavor very quickly because they're well developed. With lighter roast, those beans, so goes the theory, and taste-wise, it seems the case that if you start your extraction immediately after pre-infusion with light beans, you're going to under-extract. And so the blooming is an attempt to fix that. It's to put water on the puck as if you're going to make an espresso. So it's not a Slayer style slow infusion. It's full fast infusion, rise the pressure, and then just stop. Just hold the water on the puck, and then you wait 30 seconds. It's also a little bit different because it does hold the pressure, which is more like a traditional espresso. So it's pushing that pre-infusion water onto the puck as opposed to just letting it percolate through. And then at the end of the espresso, the end of the blooming is a flow controlled shot, which just squirts out all the water that's been sitting on the puck. So if you look at normal blooming espresso, if you got rid of that pause, it would essentially be a normal espresso. Big pause. The main things that are hard about the blooming, one is it needs very, very fine grinds. Otherwise it channels like hell. It needs that because there's so much water contact time that the puck is very wet and very likely to let water through. You'll get a high extraction. And the problem though is if you make it too fine, then at the end of the shot you choke and you go up to 11 bar. So you have these two poles of difficulty. One is not fine enough, in which case it channels and it's just sour. Too fine, in which case it goes up to 12 bar, and you have something that's just not open. It's just boring tasting. Oh, and you asked what's the allongé. And the allongé is a normal espresso but with a fast flow rate. So a normal espresso is extracting somewhere between 1 to 2.5 mils a second normally. Whereas allongé is going for 4.5 mils per second. So 2 to 3 times the water flow rate. Its reason for existing is, again, light roasts. So those light roasts are less willing to give up their flavor, less willing to give up coffee material. So they need more water contact. And you can either do that by just putting water on and letting it sit, like blooming, or you can use an allongé to have a lot of water pass through quickly. The difference is going to be also that your allongé is going to end up with, I think, about 3 times the in-cup volume of a normal espresso. So it's going to be like a long black in terms of in terms of your concentration. And allongé is the same word as lounge and lounge chair. It means resting or just kind of stretched out is what it means. That's why it's called allongé. It's a stretched out coffee. And it differs from other methods of making espresso because you're not adding water. It's not an espresso with water added. It's just an espresso made with a lot more water flow. In terms of difficulty, the allongé is even harder to do than because at the fast flow rates, small changes in grind cause huge differences in pressure. So that's why I want to kind of push that one out to a different week. Those blooming allongé are focused on light roasts, though blooming works well with medium roasts as well. I wouldn't use it on a dark roast, but I found with like a medium that just gives me, medium roast that gives me just chocolate flavors, use blooming and then suddenly there's red wine coming out, for example.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of neat, something you have, and you have subtleties you didn't really get. So I've used blooming on just like an Ethiopian medium light, and it made it more interesting. That's what I did at the post-trade show. The other thing about blooming is blooming's about 68 seconds to do. So it's not something a cafe would usually be willing to do. Whereas allongé is just the opposite. You're blasting water through there, so you're making a long black equivalent coffee in like 35 seconds. So it's actually a time saver to do an allongé, whereas a blooming is just the opposite. It's a time suck.
Thank you.
I've got a question. We're running a dual boiler at the moment, a Breville, which has been a very good machine, but it's been about 6 months. It's really been playing up. It's very, very temperamental, and we find with pressure, it's often seeming to just blast our puck to pieces. So we've taken as an emergency thing, we're packing something like 28 grams in a 23-gram triple basket, and we both drink our coffee. My wife's hiding to the side; she's camera shy, but that's the way we've sort of dealt with it. And in terms of dialing it in, there seems to be only one way we can get a decent coffee out of that, and that's to try and very slowly extract that. If we try and do single shots, we find it's just blasting holes in our puck no matter what our preparation. But the reason I bring that up is about a year ago, before I'd even heard of you guys as decent making the machines, I happened to buy a decent basket. I bought a whole bunch of baskets, VST and stuff, and I bought a decent 10-gram basket, which on this machine is completely useless to me because it's just so flat packed. I tried everything to try and get a single shot of coffee out of a 10-gram basket with this, and it doesn't work. Now, that brings me to my question. Most of the demos I see on the decent machine are done with the 18-gram basket, but you guys sell a great range. Do you find, or is it much easier on the decent machine, given the fact that you've got pressure control, flow control? Can you get a good single shot out of a 10-gram basket if you don't want a coffee that's going to blow your head off at 4 p.m. In the afternoon?
So 10 grams, yes. I'm not a fan of our 7-gram basket. That's a quite difficult format. 15 grams is the most common that people use. And what they'll do is if they don't want to blow themselves out, they just do it as a ristretto. because 15 is really easy to pull. But 10 is doable as well. I guess I'd say if I were doing the 10-gram basket, I would probably lower the pressure a little bit because you do have not that wide. A 10-gram shot in an old style espresso machine that had a 53 millimeter basket. So this is what 58 mils, which is what your Breville uses and is mostly the standard. But Della Corte, for example, is 53. So it's just half a centimeter less. But what happens is you get a deeper bed for the given dose. And so it means you can make smaller shots more successfully on those 53 millimeter baskets. And that's the theory behind our 7-gram basket as well, is it goes like this and then it's like a small little thing. But that's the theory. I don't have a lot of success with the 7-gram dose. But then again, I think it's probably made for Italians drinking ultra dark roasted coffee. So really easy to extract with that kind of bean. However, there's a red flag that you said, which is the Breville is a good machine. And if you're having such difficulty, I suspect your grinder.
We got a niche grinder, but we've only had that a few weeks, which we did. The niche is much easier. We had the Breville Smart grinder, which wasn't a bad grinder for its price, but the niche we're really, really loving. But our machine, it's behaving in the strangest of ways. It throws on the pump at random times. It cuts in and out. It's got so many problems. We haven't been able to descale it for at least 6 months because now anytime we go into descale program, it errors. We've had it for 6 years. It's been repaired 4 times under warranty. And once we just decided to pull the trigger, we actually write a budgeting app, which we're about to release. And we've had this as one of the things in our budget for at least 2 years, a new coffee machine. So we've just decided the poor old Breville, it's not going to get any more love from us. We will probably offer it on Coffee Snobs once we're done and say to anybody who can be bothered pulling it apart, replacing the pumps, doing what they need to, go at it. It's all yours. But when I saw the ZPM, I don't know if you're allowed to say that here, but when I saw that on Kickstarter years and years ago, I loved the idea of what they were doing. Back then, you couldn't actually fund a Kickstarter from Australia without dancing through and making all things. So I never fell into that, but I followed it all the way through to its conclusion, if you could call it concluded. People still complain about it, but it wasn't until after I ordered the machine that I realized that you had any connection with that at all, that you were one of the backers and things. So the decent was just a flat out, I've got to have this and see what kind of feedback we can get. So we'll go from a machine that's behaving very, very badly. Sometimes the pump just seems to blast out and then it backs off, but the pressure gauge shows you 9 bar at all times. They may as well have just painted it on.
Well, that's the case for every machine. The only machines that give you real pressure are lever machines because they have to, because there's no pump. The La Marzocco machines, if you put the mod on the group head, that's got like a bike pump gauge on the top, and ours. Otherwise, every machine tells you 9 bar no matter what's happening at the puck, which makes it really hard. So whoever you are, I'm gonna mute you. Sorry.
When I have a Zoom call, I often start them out by explaining to people that if you're using a laptop, you can turn mute on and then you can hold down spacebar to talk. And once everybody jumps onto that, you tend to have a smoother call in my experience.
Thank you for doing that then. Let's see, see if I want to go back to some of the questions you've asked. So first of all, the Breville grinder is junk, is really pretty looking, but it is great for the price, but I wouldn't call it an espresso grinder. It's probably worth keeping it as a pour-over basket, a pour-over grinder. Luca says no. Okay.
We're keeping it. It's in the pantry at the moment, just sitting on a shelf there. In fact, we got a lot of our decent accessories a few days ago, and now I've got all these nice jugs and another tamper. I don't know what I'm going to do with all this stuff now, but I think we're probably going to have a family member who'll be a grateful beneficiary of all my crap.
Luca, do you have experience with that grinder? The Breville Sage grinder?
Ours is the smart grinder. I don't know.
Space bar. Yeah, We had one for a little while around the office. We used it as a decaf grinder. Like it was barely capable. It was okay, but I think it's got, I think that the part that connects the motor to the burrs or something is made of plastic or something. So like the teeth that engage it can actually just wear off, and, you know, it doesn't turn it, like it's a piece of junk. I think, look, in terms of the grind that it's capable of, it's probably like it'll make coffee of some description, you know, keep it around if your niche packs up or whatever. It's like, it's better than nothing. But I mean, I went on a camping trip and I ground some coffee with a brick and a plastic bag, and that wasn't that bad either. So I don't know how high praise that is.
Mortar and pestle.
Lucas, could you stop being kind and just tell us what you really think?
Have we, I was going to say, you asked a bunch of questions before you actually said a bunch of things that kind of rose questions in my mind. I don't know if we need to go over them or if you want to.
Oh, look, I'm happy to. I've resisted posting on Diaspora for the time being because I don't have the machine, and I just feel like, you know, once you've got it in your hand, that's the better time to start throwing things out there. So I'm very happy to throw up some threads, and there's some
Okay.
a lot of guys that would be happy to jump in.
As it happens, I've got a Breville dual boiler. I need to descale so I can flog it. We bought it 6 years ago because I think the Breville, for its price, is great. And they've paid for everything 20 years ago. They've done no R&D for 20 years. And it's made of plastic. And there is absolutely no way we could compete in that price range. I just think they've nailed, they're the cheapest acceptable espresso machine.
I honestly think it's a good way to get. I went from a company, I was working in a post-production studio, and they had $20,000 machines on every level. So they insisted every staff member, if they wanted to make their own coffee, had to get barista training, and that's what got me into it. And when I left there, it's like, wow, how do I get a decent coffee without paying, you know, $4 or $5 for it? So it was the best introduction to us for making half decent coffee at home. But then we started roasting our own, and then we started like, why can't we make coffee that tastes like, you know, this cafe, which is good? We can better the crap cafes, but and that's when we really started, you know, delving into this thing. And then there's a rabbit hole. And what Luca said before about, you know, keep it around in case your niche packs up. It's like, you can't really go back. That's like saying keep a jar of instant coffee around in case you don't have a coffee machine. You'd rather just go to a cafe. I live in Melbourne. It's not that difficult to find.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Also, the niche is cheap enough. Just buy a second one for your pour overs. That's perfectly good. Just to speak to some things you did talk about, though, about 28 grams and overdosing and that sort of thing. So if you were using that grinder on this machine, you would see things like the flow rate being much too high, not having any pressure. That would be your first flag that something's wrong. Obviously, if it's sputtering through, that's weird. The Breville, even though I don't think they talk about it, has a pre-infusion step built into it. So it gently starts your puck and then rises, which is, I think, one of the reasons it makes better coffee than, let's say, any 61. So we do much the same thing with a bit more subtlety, but I was super impressed in a machine that price having a slow pre-infusion.
One of the first things we saw go on our machine is if we don't hold down the shot button to kickstart the pump, when it gets to pre-infusion stage, the machine makes this funny humming sound, but the pump's not actually running. And we've found that's half the problem with ours. The pump seems to cut in and out. I don't know if it's an electronics issue or a pump issue, but that's why Ginny somehow got one of the best coffees I've ever drunk in my life out of it about 6 weeks ago. And the afternoon coffee was almost as good. And then it just went back to being rubbish.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if we had the niche at that point. Was that with the niche? No, that was with the Breville Smart Grinder. And that's something that does frustrate me and probably a lot of other people that are only making 3 or 4 coffees a day. It's hard to dial stuff in and get it right. And I think that's one of the reasons the Decent is so attractive, that at least you get an idea of what you might have done right. You know, you've got that data there. And
unless your puck prep is random, your shots on the decent are going to be pretty much all the same if you change nothing.
I'm looking forward to that then.
So, I mean, the only thing I'd recommend is, using small bags of coffee so that you get through them and they don't go stale on you.
We roast our own, so we roast about 800 grams at a time, and then we will go through that over the next 7 to 9 days, and then we roast again. So that's going to be our biggest variable going forward. Actually, is now we've got to look at our roasting. So when we get the decent, we're actually going to buy some small bags from a local roaster here, and just start comparing things and see what comes out.
So since you mentioned you're a roaster, I didn't mention another thing that's interesting about blooming, is that blooming can work with freshly roasted beans and other recipes cannot. Okay. And the reason is that if you make an espresso from freshly roasted beans, the CO2 that's coming out of those beans will impede the extraction. Okay. And you get a lower extraction. So you're supposed to wait some number of days. The thing about blooming is that CO2 comes out very quickly in the contact of water. So if you make a blooming with beans you just roasted, during that pre-infusion phase, for 30 seconds, the CO2 is going to completely outgas in the water. And you'll get about 1% higher extraction from that. So that was something Rayo posited. It hasn't been worked on that much because not many people are roasters, but we think the theory is good that you should get a 1% higher extraction with freshly roasted beans with blooming, and we don't have any other recipe that can do that, the rapid outgassing. And the reason for that theory comes out of an observation, which is, why do Italian bars manage to use freshly roasted beans? And the reason is they all use grinders with hoppers, and they grind about an hour's worth of beans. So they grind, it sits in the hopper, and by the time it's gone from the top of the hopper to the bottom, it's outgassed. Okay. So rapid outgassing of beans appears to be possible. There's the way they do it, and in theory this way. So I won't promise that, because this is not something we've talked about on Diaspora. Is fresh roasting and getting the extraction, actually measuring the extraction and seeing, let's say, comparing a brand new roast to a 7-day roast. But if you wanted to raise that conversation when you had the D1, I think a half dozen people would like to have it.
Yeah, you've thrown a few more variables into our coffee making. Thank you for that. That should be fun.
Well, also, a lot of people have I'm going to blank on it now because I'm going to call the Japanese little sample roaster. Well, it's British, but a Japanese name. Someone remind me what that's called?
Ikawa.
Ikawa, thank you. And so it'd be nice, to wake up at 8, roast some beans, and at 8:30, make a coffee from those roasted beans. And hey, if that works.
I'm a roaster at the moment, and that can do up to 400 grams, so we can roast for a week or so. I'm taking great interest on the Cafe Lat, make the Nano, which looks like it takes up a lot less bench space, but it looks to be like to get our 800 grams of beans, we're going to do 8 roasts in a row, and we're not sure we would love doing that, but it does look like a very funky roaster, and it's about the same price as the Benoit was anyway, so it's within our range to look at. Okay.
Luca said 15-gram basket. Awesome. I'd agree. I'd say if you're new to the D1, just start with 15. It depends on.
Sitting here, got delivered the other day. We just need the machine now. And we're cool.
Do you have a Plus or a Pro?
A Pro, actually, Miriam. And while I'm here, can I shout out how, you already know this, I'm sure, but her customer service is beyond excellent. I've asked her lots of difficult questions and asked her for updates on things, especially shipping's been so difficult, and she's just kept me in the loop and been absolutely fantastic. But, she said I actually got the last perfect mirrored panel that you shipped. So lucky me. I expect that to have a signature on it or something like that. The very last
on the front with a ballpoint pen.
That's it. That's it. It was perfect.
I couldn't let it go out unmolested.
Just scratch it in, engrave it in, John.
We might really shit 4-year-old handwriting.
I'm so
I'd
glad
like to
it's
second
already been
everything you-
shipped. They're, yeah.
Happy face. Any other questions?
I'd just like to second everything David mentioned, that from start to finish, from buying the unit all the way to getting it, to the support on Diaspora, to these things, just thank you for doing it. I don't know if you get that a lot, but it's really, really unique, and it's very helpful.
I'm very glad. As it turns out, COVID's got a little silver lining, which is we're just not doing trade shows ever again. And so we're brainstorming about, okay, how do we reach out to people? And we realized that a good day at a trade show would be like 10 interested people. And it would cost like 5,000 US to make that happen. And so let's do this. It's just way more fun. In an hour, I'm gonna get myself a glass of wine.
The tasting is a little more difficult like this, but yeah, other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm glad that that's working out. I mean, I can tell you that from February to now, our sales tripled in the middle of logistics and supply chain hell. So things like that perfect mirror panel. God, I wish that didn't happen. But we had 2 suppliers lined up, and one of them just vanished. Even though they made it, they sent us photographs. They never shipped them, and they reimbursed us the money. And the other people just wanted to quit. So we found ourselves with like factory shutdown again if we don't find a solution. And the die-cut mirrors seem to give us a good compromise. There was a comment on Instagram I thought was really interesting today. Someone said they have a Slayer, and the mirror on the Slayer dulls after 6 months. And so they like the idea of a replaceable mirror, which that's cool. I've ever sent a decent to Indonesia. Yeah, there's probably 4 or 5 in Indonesia. So yes, sorry, that was a private message, but it doesn't matter. I made it public.
Actually, my cousin asked me last night, he said, so you're buying this machine, how many of them are in Australia? And I said, well, I know of 2 others, because I think Damien and Luca are 2 of the most talkative people on the forum. But how many are there in Australia? Do you have any idea?
I could look it up here, but it's hundreds. Australia's the second biggest for us. So it's in order of countries, it's Australia, so US, Australia, Canada, and then the German-speaking countries. And at that point, you're at 90% of our market. So yes, there's a few in Indonesia. Hello, please buy more so I can come visit you. But we have sent it, and that's not a problem. And Malaysia and Japan, and there's machines everywhere. There's about 1,500 machines out there now. All right, anyone else? Any other questions? You're welcome to jot in anytime. I'm going to go on to the blooming, and the blooming is going to go badly. I have not done anything on this. I've made a normal espresso, which my niche is set up for 15 grams default. Okay, so that's going to be totally not appropriate for blooming. I'm just going to guesstimate 2 notches finer. But otherwise, and I'm also going to change baskets from a 15 gram to an 18 gram. So it's going to be chaos, and that's kind of on purpose so that you guys see when things go wrong, how do you read the chart, and what do you do next, and when do you know if the blooming was as it's supposed to be. Okay, so I'll get started.
I need a coffee, so I might do a blooming as well.
Okay, well, Luca, you're probably faster at it than I am, especially since you're not on camera.
No, new grind and new coffee. So hopefully one of us will go too coarse and one of us will go too fine, and everyone will be able to learn something.
So also the beans I have, they're going to be challenging because these are Oaxacan medium light, but the more on the medium side. And with my traditional espresso, I don't know why, but they're tasting a bit dusty. And I really like these coffees. I like them a lot, but I took a pause. I had like 3 different bags of different stuff. And now I just switched back to this and I don't have it dialed in. So I'm curious as to whether the problem is the beans are a bit dusty and stale tasting, or is the problem, so it's roasted on June 8th. So that's pretty good, right? We're 12 days in. So they're not old, and I just cracked it open. But this happens sometimes too, is, you know, these kinds of seals, they aren't perfect. And if air does get in there, 24 hours later, especially in hot weather, your beans are done. They're no good. By the way, I don't know if you guys know it, we changed our baskets. I didn't make a big deal of it. See if I can find it. Yeah, I don't think you're gonna see it. So, yeah, you might be able to see. Can you see that it says 20 grams right there on the edge? So on the four corners of these baskets, it now says what the dose is, and the previous ones didn't. And we tried a bunch of ways to label them, like putting 18 grams here, but it caused some carbon deposits in the holes, so that wasn't cool. Labeling on the side is fine, but once it's in a portafilter, it doesn't do much for you. So yeah, so that says, oh, this is an 18-gram basket. I don't have to change it. Okay, so that's a nice little feature. That is also filthy, so first thing I'm going to do is change that. Okay. Another thing I want to say is Blooming is a temperature profiled espresso. So unlike normal espresso that tends to be at a constant temperature at your infusion, Blooming is a creation of Scott Rayo. And because there's a big pause, during that 30 seconds, the beans are going to cool. The slurry is going to cool. So in order to counteract that, he's putting in extra hot water in the first 12 seconds. 97.5 Celsius is what he's putting in, which is way higher than you normally want to extract. But because the beans are room temperature, you're ending up with a slurry that's probably around 88, 90 in that 12 seconds. Okay. So because it's temperature profiled and that first step is high temperature, the group head right now, it's at default, which is 88 Celsius. So if you do Blooming, change on the tablet to the Blooming and give it a couple minutes, because the group head, it needs time to heat up to the new profile. So if you're changing between profiles with very different temperature goals, especially at the beginning, give the machine, let's say, 2 minutes to get there.
Will the machine actually tell you whether or not it's ready for that profile?
Yep. So let's see if we can show you. So there's the temperature. Is that in focus? Okay. There is metal and gold. Hopefully right about there. Okay. And right now we are bang on, right? We're 88.0 gold and it's 88.2.3 on the metal. Okay. And what's going to happen is I'm going to go to settings, preset, and then choose Blooming. I hit OK. And when I do that, you'll see the goal has now changed to 87.5, I think. And hopefully the group head, the metal temperature is going up. Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, we're almost there. It's 92 already. So it's gone up 4 Celsius. So it may only need a minute, but just the worst thing to do is to change it right before you like, oh, whoops, I forgot to change the setting. And then you're starting a good 10 Celsius below where you want. And your coffee will taste less good. It'll let you start it. It's not as optimum as it could be. And let's see.
The other thing I've noticed, since I had a Breville Oracle, which is like the dual boiler, and I went to this one, and it warms up. The decent warms up really fast. Everything about it, starting up and getting ready is really fast, which was surprising for me, but it's very welcome. And even though I
is because
even though I have the dual boiler, the steam on this one's been great too. Even though you're doing it sequentially, it switches states so fast. I haven't really. It's just been great.
Yeah, there's very little mass in the group head. because we want to be able to do quick temperature changes. And because there's not much mass, we can heat it fast.
Right.
So, and that's in the version in February. Luca's been playing with it. Some of the internal parts inside here that are in the water path are going to change from being copper or brass rather to being ultim, the resin that we use in the mixing channel. And that will knock off, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds off your warm-up time. But B, will also allow us to do much faster temperature profiling. Because if you're changing 10 Celsius the water, but then you're running it through big pieces of brass, the brass is going to fight that. We don't yet, I mean, a lot of what we do, no one knows if it's going to have an important impact on coffee, right? It won't hurt it, but we don't yet know because no machine exists that can do rapid temperature changes. So if we can go from 98 Celsius to 90 in 3 seconds, thereby getting the infusion those first 10 seconds up faster, is that going to make a really noticeable temperature taste change, or is it going to give us burn off flavors? Don't know, but it'll be nice to have the power.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute because, well, I don't know. I'd rather not blow you guys out with my niche grinder, so I'm just going to mute back up. And if someone wants to talk, go ahead.
So I guess I might just jump in and say I've nearly prepared a 15-gram basket shot. I have no idea if this grind setting is going to be right or not, so I'm going to pull a blooming shot as well, and hopefully, yeah. So
Do you brew after that? I see you're removing the coffee out. How do you prepare the basket after that?
Well, I've actually just swapped grinder with a friend, and so ordinarily I'd have a collar on here and I'd kind of stir it around and do a WDT. But this grinder is insane. It just delivers 0 clumps. So hopefully that won't be too big a deal. So I'm just gonna swap around and just do the force tamper.
How do you like the force tamper?
Yeah, it's good. It's really consistent.
Wow.
I mean, I sort of one of the reasons why I wanted to get it was because we were doing a lot of tests of different things, and I wanted to remove the tamper as a variable. I didn't think that it would necessarily be the best, but I stuck with it. So you know, it was kind of fine. Let's just see how's John going. I'm on my phone, so I can't really see.
John looks like
so I'm going to start.
Are you good to go, John, or do you want me to?
I'm good to go. So I've started the shot.
Okay,
I'm going to try Blooming Cam. All right. You guys see the shot?
You can. Yeah.
Yeah, so what should happen now is now the water's coming in, and we'll see a few drops. Let me see if I can see it too. Good. And then the shot will stop. There we go. Okay, there's water. Boom, it stops. Okay. Now, one of the things I'm usually looking at here is how much drippage is there. If there's more than 10 mils of drippage in this 30-second pause, that's too coarse. If it's less than 3 mils, it's too fine and it's not going to work either. So I do have a scale on here, and I'm just watching this here to see. It looks like I'm actually okay. So here we are now after that pause. The shot's going to pull up. Let's go back and take a look at it as it happens. Actually, it looks really okay.
Yeah.
It even sounds nice. We'll look at the chart in a second. Look at the sides of the glass. There's virtually no channeling.
Wow.
Okay. Now that would be dumb luck. But let's take a look at it. It could go a little finer. I'll show you the chart. Still pretty happy with it. Okay, so here's our tablet. Okay, I'm going to tap on that here, and you can see it. So there's our pre-infusion. Now, one thing to note is that's the blue line goes down. That's the water flow. The green is the pressure. I'm always looking to see if that green line drops quickly, and here it didn't. Is that right? Yeah, we actually managed to maintain 1 bar of pressure even at the end of the whole stage. If you're too coarse, that's going to drop to 0 bar. And what you'll see typically is this green line just crash. Okay, and I'd be happier if it had held on more. At least it held on to 1. But if we go a little finer, hopefully this line here will be more like that, as opposed to crash. Now the next thing to note is that at the end, when we had the flow here, we did not get as much pressure as we'd like. It's all right. We're in 3 to 4.5 bar, but we're just at the edge of espresso. So typically 4 bars where you're getting crema. We saw nice crema on there, and in fact, that really looks okay. Devil's in the taste, of course. What I'm going to do is taste this, and then as Luca pulls his shot, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go only a half notch finer because I feel like I'm kind of close. All right, this is way too hot. So it's because it's in a double walled glass. And so Luca, take it away. Go ahead and do your shot.
Yeah, cool. So I've just poured a bunch of hot water into the cup and teared the scales. So let's just have a go. Now I've got a gusher lever profile or something on as a God shot reference. I don't know why, since this shot was terrible. You know, you can see it flowed at like 4 mils per second. So let's have a look at what's happening here. Okay, so this is going to be too fast. This is going to be too coarse, I think, because we're already at 7 mils out already, and you can see it's peaked right up here, dropped straight down. So this is going to be a bit of a gusher. It'll probably only attain a very low pressure peak, but that might actually taste okay with this coffee since it's Coffee Collective Kieni filter roast. So I'm going to stop that. I've let that run a little bit too long, so this is nearly a 3 to 1. But you can see here that I haven't even attained 1.5 bar. So so this is absolutely, you're seeing some bad shots, but it might taste good.
Are you using the Levercraft grinder that's there to the left of your machine?
It's the Ultra grinder. It's a friend of mine's. He just dropped it off yesterday and swapped it for my grinder, and
I was
had a bit of a
down
play
at
around.
Levercraft last weekend, and Eric, the guy he was showing that to me at his trailer. They actually use a pair of decents in their coffee trailer, their food truck, to make shots with. But yeah, it was pretty impressive watching it work. It's really fast.
Yeah, it's a pretty weird grinder. It's it's got some stuff in it that's a bit work in progress. It's got some stuff in it that's great. I'm not sort of down to the bottom of it yet. We were pretty much able to get a pretty close result to the max the other day, but I won't abduct this call and make it about grinders. What I will say is, so what I'm drinking here is Kieni from Coffee Collective. So the thing to know is, Kenya often harvests from December to January, or maybe, November to kind of end of January. So around about now is usually the time of year when we're flush with main harvest Kenyans, but there have been delays due to COVID-19 and all of that. This is one of the first new crop Kenyans that's made it onto the market. So one of my friends sort of had us all pile in and buy it. And new crop Kenyan season is always, an exciting time for anyone who likes coffee. This particular roast is very light. And in fact, it's lighter than Coffee Collective has been in the past. So it probably needs to sit a little bit longer. I'll just swap the camera around. Sorry, it's bad lighting, so I don't think anyone can really see it. It's quite, there's a lot of shadow there. It's quite an even roast and it's looking uneven. But yeah, so this is quite a light roast. It's not, it doesn't quite have as much of the red currant, like sometimes you can get rose from this one. It's quite a distinctive Kenyan. But it just tastes like this coffee is just a little too young. So I could, I could fine it up and get it tasting better. But I think I'm just going to drink this as it is because it's not bad. It's sort of like quite a good filter coffee. And I've just walked back to my computer.
I've got my second attempt ready to go. It has been sitting for about a minute, so I don't know if that will matter, but I'm off and running.
How did the first one taste to you, John?
I haven't tasted it yet because it's in a double wall glass and it's just going to take a long time to heat. But this one I'm doing not double walled, so I'm hoping that it cools off a lot faster. Okay, so there we are. We might get less dripping because this is a half notch finer. You can see it stopped a little bit earlier this time, and we're getting quite a lot less dripping. And what I like also blooming is because the pre-infusion is pressurized around 5 bar, these first drops are proper espresso. You can see there, if you look at the cup, it's thick, right? That's what's coming out is proper sludge because we're under pressure still. Okay,
and you were saying you like to see the drippage between about 3 and 10 mil. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I had very little drippage there. I had 2 grams of drippage.
But I mean, the range you're looking for, you're saying it's somewhere around
5 to 7 seems to be perfect, if that makes any sense. And sure. I mean, this is a medium roast, so you can see I am getting crema, but that's the point, is blooming is an all-purpose recipe. It was developed by Rayo specifically to deal with light roasts, but all coffees can benefit from a bit more water contact time. And I'll show you that because that's a pretty looking espresso, actually.
Oh yeah.
There's, I mean that's thick, even though it had all that time. So let's look and see. The chart looks actually pretty okay. So I'm going to tap to zoom. So a couple things to note. One is the pressure did not drop as fast as the other one was like plump and then stay at 1. But it did, I think it ended at like 1.3 bar. So only a little bit difference from 1 bar, but a little bit gentler. And if you have the scale, the Bluetooth scale, it's actually really handy for blooming because there is a thick brown line of total shot weight as well as the drips. And so when you use the scale, you can look at the end of your blooming pause, how much accumulated drippage you have. So you don't have to sit there and look at the scale. You just go, okay, what happened? Oh, look, the pressure rose when I was at 3 grams or at 12 grams. So that's a reason to use the scale, especially for blooming. Okay, going back to this, the last stage is flat flow. And here what happened is the pressure rose in kind of an interesting kind of way. Usually things don't look like that. Usually they go up and then pressure goes down. But it looks like the puck was rearranging is what happened in this case. But no matter, because we went immediately up to 5 bar, and then we peaked at 9.5 bar at the end of the shot. So I probably could have actually pulled this shot longer because the pressure was still increasing. And that's a.
It looks good.
Let me see how much drink I have in cup. Yeah, I could have pulled that longer. That's 45 in cup. And so it's 18 in, 45 out, which is a bit short for a blooming. Usually you want a bit more out. So this is going to be more powerful than I probably would want to drink. Well, I'm not into super high TDS or concentration coffee. It's just not my thing. Some people really like it. That is still burning hot. So I'm going to go back to the previous one. I would say lower pressure and more liquid can often be totally fine for a lighter roast. So cool, just a side rant, I tried to convince Rayo that tip of the day should be that when people say that espresso needs to be drunk hot because it turns bitter if you don't drink it quickly, my feeling is no, your espresso was bitter and the heat was simply masking it. And there's quite a few famous people who let their coffee cool before they taste it. He told me that was already common knowledge and no one believes that. So anyway, if anyone's on the call and they think, yes, you need to drink your espressos really quickly because otherwise they turn bitter as they cool, no, you're just tasting the innate bitterness of the coffee. So I would say the first one, this is just not the right coffee. It's perfectly pleasant medium roast. I'm getting a little bit of tropical fruit on top of the chocolate. This is with the lower pressure, but otherwise not really much. Now, one problem here is that this is a lot more liquid than this. So the thicker one, it's gonna be less pleasant anyway because it's higher concentration. But it's way more open. So I've got like other kinds of caramelization flavors coming out now, like toffee is coming out, and kind of like a fresh cream flavor. A little more tropical, but I would say it tastes like someone's thrown 25% third wave beans in there. It's still dominantly medium roast, pleasant chocolate. So there you go. That was
How much of a change was that on your grinder, on your niche? How much
that
did
was
you
half a notch.
Just a half notch.
Yeah, half a notch. But I was pretty close because I think I had, I don't know, what we were like 10, I don't remember how many grams. I usually use the drippage from that time to be my gauge. And the reason is the pressure afterwards can look terrible due to channeling. So it's not always easy to tell if you screwed up. Whereas at the beginning, the pre-infusion, if you got a lot of dripping, you're not fine enough. Or you just need a little more coffee. But there you go. And those bloomings will come out very consistently now. So if you just dial that in and use that as your regular coffee, you're fine. I'll either take questions or pass it back to Luca if you're going to make a coffee that's better.
You'd mentioned a little bit about the 3 to 7 seconds as this, ideal maximum amount of kind of drippage before the real extraction starts. Is that the same for the Longo blooming?
No, this is just me arbitrarily saying something for blooming.
Like, would you find the general rule similar on the Longo? Like, basically, you're doing a copy, right? Like with that Longo, which is great. It's been a fun thing to mess around with on the machine. And I've noticed in some of those, I'm getting a lot more drippage in that pre-infusion, and perhaps that's just a sign that I need to grind that finer.
You're talking about the blooming allongé?
Yes. Yeah. So sorry about that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to confess I've not used it much. So but I would say that because that recipe needs a coarser grind than the blooming in order to maintain that flow rate, you're likely to see more dripping at the beginning.
Okay. Fair enough.
But that's not really a coffee that pre-infuses. And what I mean is that the blooming allongé isn't really even doing pre-infusion. It's really just trying to run water through evenly at pre-infusion speeds, because pre-infusion is 4 mils per second, and the allongé is 4 to 4.5 mils per second. So it's more like a flat flow coffee.
Thanks. One of the other questions I had that might be insightful for the group is ultralights and blooming espressos, and just kind of where you see that fitting in, perhaps even more generally across profiles that are good matches for those ultralights that folks are experimenting with.
So Tim wrote a bit more to me on that. I won't repeat the whole message, but ultralights, there haven't been machines made to do them. Right, the machines that have been made by Italians for their coffee tradition. And the only people who really made an attempt on light and ultralight was Slayer with their needle valve for pre-infusion. Otherwise, no one's really attempted. I think the Mina is capable of it, but the people who make that machine are not focused on light beans. So where we are with light roasts and getting them to taste good is who is into it and who is experimenting to try and make recipes that work. So light roasts will tend to channel and fall apart faster. So that makes them more challenging. And so the current state of the art, I would say, with light roasts is we know that light roasts from theory and from taste need more water contact, either speed of water or time with water, one of the two. So traditional 28-second espresso is just not a good way to get a light that tastes good. So if you're hearing from people that they stick to the default recipes, there's a reason, which is that Rayo's my mentor, and a lot of the recipes that are on there are his. And a lot of what I was doing with the design of the machine was to try and get Rayo to want to drink espresso, because he was purely a pour over guy, because espresso as a technology does not extract espresso, a light roast, well, right? Because it's a the very word is fast. And light roasts by their nature don't extract quickly. So I think that for most people, if they take blooming and they mess with it, they're probably going to make it worse. And so for most people, I'd say stick to the allongé and the blooming, and try and pull those well. Personally, I really like the allongé recipe for light roast because it gives me a dilution TDS that is pleasing for those coffees. So I don't end up adding water. And since you need to add water for those drinks, why not use the added water to get a higher extraction rather than adding water afterwards? Did that answer everything that you asked about, Tim?
It did. Yeah, that was very helpful, actually, on multiple fronts.
Luca, do you want to add anything to that, or are you on a loo break?
Yeah, I'm. No, I am. My espresso machine is in my bathroom. So I am on a loo break, but it's a loo break in which I'm making coffee.
That's very practical if you drink a lot of coffee. I mean, in one, out the other.
I'm just minimizing my travel time, Josh. It means I can maximize my espresso time. No, so what I've done in the interim is, and it's actually quite funny that we had that question come up about light roast. One of the bits of homework that I was given was my friend who dropped off the grinder for me just dropped off this backpacked bag of it's an Ada Batley experimental natural process where they picked all of the cherries by cutting all of the stalks, so that when they natural processed when they dried it all out, there was no tear in the fruit in which mold could get an ingress. We bought this coffee a while ago, and it was a very, very light roast. It was very, very difficult to work with. And so my friend left this in his freezer for 6 months or something. And he said, well, try it now, see what you think. So that's what I'm doing. I am absolutely just taking a punt on Blooming Espresso with this. I have no idea how to adjust this grinder. So I've just arbitrarily made it much, much finer. The bloom temp is, it is up higher. The main temp is down a little lower. And we will all see, it might gush, it might choke. I'm hoping that this will choke so that, you guys will have experienced a gusher and a choker from me, and then I'll have provided you a balanced diet. But who knows? We'll see. So I'll just go about making all of this now, and you guys can chat a little bit amongst yourself.
Bugs has shown up, and she's doing a lot of accounting work, and so she gets to drink the coffee, the Blooming I just made that was successful.
Gotta keep going.
She's into milk, so we're going to steam some milk. She's mostly drinking non-dairy, so we've got cashew milk. I say mostly because she likes a bit of butterfat, so we add some half and half. And I'm going to assume not everyone's at the master level, so I'm going through more basic stuff.
Neither are you.
That's true. I'm just faking it. So I've got a thermometer there, and I'm setting it, because I'm in America, this is a Fahrenheit thermometer, but I'm heating to about 55. This is set to 135 Fahrenheit, about 50 actually. And that, for those of you who don't have the machine, the tablet is disconnected, talks by Bluetooth. You use the controller. You just move a little bit to the side so they can see. So. And you can also see the steam when it's happening there. I'll show you the chart in a second, but this is temperature, flow rate, and pressure. You don't really need to know about this, except if you think it's steaming slowly, you can see the evidence of it. Okay. So just to give you an idea in terms of steam time, that was 23 seconds to steam an 8-ounce latte. So the steaming time on the 1.3 is better. Everything came out of the fridge. So there we go. Don't know about latte art in this thing. I will say the cashew milk gives me a pass because you cannot make latte art with cashew milk. Yay. So I made a tornado.
Nice. Thanks.
As Luca is preparing, I'm just going to hit some of the other questions. Am I back in Hong Kong? Hong Kong is currently only admitting residents. And so Bugs is a resident. I'm not yet. And so we're waiting our paperwork and hoping to get back to Hong Kong in about 3 weeks. Otherwise, we're in California. Terry, I'm happy to talk to you more. You asked some questions about cafe use. You cannot steam and brew at the same time with this machine. That's one of the reasons it's so small. What cafes do is they buy 2 or even 3 of them, and then each machine is completely independent. So they're making espresso with one machine and steaming with the other. That's what cafes do with our machine. And the steaming time is not bad. And in about 6 months, it'll get about 50% faster. because we're coming out with a 220 optimized hot water heater, which goes to 2200 watts instead of 1500 watts. I think,
I think Luca's ready.
I think that
Luca's
answers everything.
finished.
Luca is running. Luca, you can unmute if you want. I pass the mic to you.
Mic drop.
Yep. Okay. So we've gotten, yeah, so I got 39.8 out. So this is the very classic Blooming Espresso pressure pattern that we'd ordinarily see. This was a very unusual coffee because, as I said, it was very light. I don't think that this coffee was even roasted through through the end of first crack. It was probably stopped during first crack. So you can see, you know, it's gone and peaked up high and then dropped down to here. And I think I only got about 3 grams that dripped through in that time. But notwithstanding that, it only attained a pressure peak of about 5 bar. And that I think is very much because of the roast level of this coffee and the way that it grinds because of that roast level. And this pattern that you see here is the very, very typical pattern that I've basically always seen from the 98 millimeter burr sets that I've used, which is like the flat burrs, which is that you get the spike up here and then it drops down a little bit more. Now, the other thing I can point out to you that I've done here is you'll see here that I've actually bumped up the flow rate very, very slightly here. I think I bumped it up to 2.3 or 2.4 mils per second. And that's just, I still don't know what all the variables are and what they do, but the faster the flow rate, the more it sort of ends up tasting like a filter coffee. So yeah, we got 39.5, 15.0 gram dose. So we're up at about a little bit over about 2.5 to 1, but I often start with light roast coffees at 2.5 to 1. So about 37.5 grams I'd target when I'm first dialing in, because they can get a little sort of, they can get a little bitter afterwards. That Coffee Collective coffee that I had just before was like it just had no bitterness in it at all. So you could extract it 4 to 1 and it would, you know, it would still be fine. So I should taste the coffee. So I smelled it before when I ground it, and it smelled sort of very much like, you know, sort of like dried prunes, which is to me one of the hallmarks that you can get from a lot of the sort of Central American natural process type coffees, and it makes them fantastic for espresso. So the question will be, does it taste like prunes in the cup, or does it taste like grass? So let's find out. Prunes. So there you go. So so that worked out quite well. It's got a little bit of like a brown sugar to it, which is yeah, which I think is an inherent sort of a coffee characteristic as opposed to a roast characteristic. I'll just jump back onto my computer. Sorry. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So what I've done today is I've made 2 Blooming Espressos, and I think that they both illustrate sort of some you know, good and bad points that you can get out of it. So this first one's the Kenya Kieni from Coffee Collective. It's a little bit fresh. It only got up to a pressure peak of about 1.5, and it tastes under extracted. So it's got a bit of acidity to it. It doesn't have it's got tons of sweetness to it, just like absolute tons. It's got a little bit of like a fresh, like snow pea type character to it, which is not surprising given that this is like super fresh green. But it doesn't have much in the way of the you know, the classic sort of berry type flavors that, you know, we look for and we love from Kenyan coffees. And that may well be because it was just too coarse, and this is just an under extracted cup. This one from Ada is much more typical what you would expect from this green coffee, what you expect it would taste like. It has all of the sort of the prune characteristic that it would ordinarily have. It has that sort of brown sugar. It's minimized the grassiness that you can get from green coffee. And that's quite an extraordinary result from this coffee, because 6 months ago when we were drinking it fresh, it just tasted like grass. It just had no fruit flavor to it. So it was quite a disappointing coffee. So it's really come out of its shell and sort of, you know, it's proved the idea that they had about can we pick pristine fruit that is unpunctured and thereby prevent it from ever getting any mold or bacterial spoilage, because there's nowhere for the bacteria to get into the fruit in the 3 days or whatever that it's drying. So that could be a very interesting development for coffee processing in the future, as long as we're all willing to pay 20 times as much for the women that pick it to kind of go through with their nail scissors and snip it out. And Ada did say, she said, look, the women that pick it, and then she paused and she said, look, I know it sounds sexist if I say the women that pick it, but they are all women. The men are just no good, so I don't hire them. So who knows? Maybe we'll have expensive like manicure, fingernail, natural processes that are just absolutely, utterly pristine and clean going forwards. All right, I'll pass back to John.
Anyone have any questions for Luca? Okay, so the last thing I was going to do, which I think will be interesting, never before done live, I'm going to do a blooming manual. So I'm going to use the group head controller to do a Blooming Espresso completely manually.
You normally screw that up.
I know. Can you prepare the puck for me?
Yeah. How many grams?
It's all set.
All right.
So I haven't changed anything. We're still 18 grams. One caveat is when I changed the half mark on my niche, I didn't flush any beans through. So likely this is going to be even a little finer than the first one because I changed the grind and then didn't flush any beans through. So have a little noise. So doing this with the group head controller requires a small amount of setup. And that's because when you tap on the group head controller over there, you're going to take over. And when you lift, the profile goes back to what it was. Okay. So in this case, because we want a 30-second pause, we want what it was to be nothing. We want zero flow. So what I'm going to do is create a profile that is zero flow for like 2 minutes. Okay, and then that puts the machine into a flow profile. So when I touch the group head controller, I'm controlling flow. If I did a zero pressure thing for 2 minutes, then if I use the group head controller, I would be controlling pressure. So that's how you get to choose what manual mode you're in. So if I go here, I don't know how much you'll be able to see, but we'll try and make it work. I'm going to say plus here, and we're going to create a flow profile. Okay. And what we're going to do is move this to 0 mils. Actually, I'm going to turn off pre-infusion. Let's just get rid of pre-infusion.
You're already baking in the group head photo.
Okay, well, I'm going to get there quickly. All right, so now I've got decline, main, everything's set to 0. Right, so I've got a 2-minute espresso at, ooh, that's a bit hot. Oh, no, yeah, that's true. I can't do temperature profiling if I'm doing it manually. So I'll just do this at 92. Okay. I hoping that you guys can see what's going on here. I will use a scale to know when to stop the shot. Okay. And I need a cup. So I'm gonna hit start, okay? And start at this point is just gonna preheat and it's gonna go click and no water is gonna come out because this is a zero flow profile. So we wait for that, chug, 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 preheat everything. Okay, off we go. You can see we're on 0 here. So what I'm gonna do is 4 mil per second pre-infusion. There's the blue light going to 4 mils. You can see on the chart we're at 4 mils. I'm gonna watch here. And as soon as I see water come out, looks like I screwed up. Let's see if I forgot. Yeah, I did. I had it auto stop at 40 mils of water. Okay, so so you have to turn off the auto stop because in this case there's no pre-infusion. My pre-infusion was skipped, so the shot stopped. So Bugs is going to start again. So just to show you that again, here we are. Stop at pour is now off. So that's what screwed up that one. What I was thinking of doing, 18 grams. So what I was thinking of doing is including the zero flow manual control profile as just an included profile once I make a video showing you how to manually control this so that you don't do what I just did.
Do you have the flow control disc in your niche?
Yes, I do. I just put it in a couple days ago.
What did you find that did to your grind?
I had to go a notch finer.
I had to go about 5 notches finer to get the same result. So I don't know if that's just a variable that happens between them, but it's consistent now that I've got it dialed in.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I introduced Rayo to the niche in LA in December, we did both ways, and he felt strongly that anything you do that makes your grind finer is better. And his feeling is that having that disc there is putting fewer beans on the burrs, and so more likely for those to be ground more consistently. But I haven't seen anyone do a proper study.
John, we had a really interesting experience yesterday with the Ultra, where we were dialing in the Coffee Collective espresso blend, which is it's 50% Brazil de Terra, and then the rest of it is Chianti and some Colombian coffee. But the flavor is dominated by the de Terra, which gives you like quite a distinctive marzipan flavor when you really get it dialed in. And what we found was that with the max low uniformity burrs at 400 RPM, we got that dialed in first, and we got the marzipan out of it and had very good clarity of flavor. Then we moved over to the Ultra at 1500 RPM, and we got a really fine but like muddy cup when we dialed it in, and it was like super coarse, and it had like no clarity of flavor. It just had this generic roast meatiness to it, even though it was a light roast, like a fairly light roast. Then when we took the Ultra back down to 400 RPM, we were able to almost replicate the max shot and get that marzipan back, get like much greater clarity of flavor. But we just ran out of coffee before we got it properly dialed in. So it was really interesting. And the 400 RPM, the grind setting on the collar was like, I think we moved from about 7 at 1500 RPM all the way down to about like 4.2 or something. So it was quite a massive grind change at that RPM. And what that was doing in terms of the fineness or the coarseness, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it did seem like it does seem to be exactly what you were saying, that, what Scott's saying, like if you can get it working with finer grind, which I assume it was at 400 RPM, then it was quite a vivid illustration of getting much greater clarity of flavor, because it was like you stuck your nose into the cup and it was like there was literally a marzipan dessert chocolate thing in there. It was pretty extraordinary. So there you go.
Yeah, I have an EG1 that's got also variable rotation control, variable speed control, and I've just found it to taste better the slower you go.
Wow. Is that the same for filter? Have you tried it for filter?
I have not tried. But for espresso and especially for blooming.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna try again. So I'm hitting start, locking the portafilter in, and off we go. Okay, and then the chart's going to show us what's happening.
You want to show them the chart?
Okay, so here we are going to 4 mils per second. There's the blue following my finger. Okay, I'm just going to watch underneath there and see when pre-infusion is ending. There. Okay, so that's essentially exactly like it, except I went a little higher. I went to 7 bar. But otherwise, it looks like a blooming. And that was at 16 seconds. So at about 46 seconds, I'm going to come up to about 2 mils per second. The difference is I'm going to kind of target kind of pressure here. I'm going to try and get 6 to 8 bars. Okay, so up we go. So there we are at 5 bars. I'm increasing the flow a bit. And I'm about 7.5 bars. And now I'm going too high pressure, so I don't want to go to like over 10 bar. And I'm going to stop this shot when I hit there. Okay, so I was aiming for 56 mils in the cup, 55.5. Okay, it's going to be obviously not as pretty a chart as if a computer does it, but you can see that looks like very similar to the shot I just did. Actually, more crema. Quite a bit more crema, probably because of the higher pressure that I hit, right? More pressure means more crema.
Is that the better puck?
And the better puck prep, yes. Oh, please add water. Okay, so the charts come back now. So, oh, I do want to comment on Luca's. I agree with you that the reason I like your shot, even though you didn't have much in the way of hold pressure, is during pre-infusion, you didn't have a crash. You managed to hold the pressure. So to me, that's like the grind was good, and there weren't any puck prep issues there. And it's typical of light roast that you don't get much pressure at the end. But if you had instead just screwed up, not put enough coffee in, not grind enough, your pressure would have crashed. In fact, this is much more of a crash on the pressure, right? Luca's was much, it held on to the pressure much more. Now, that might also be because this was manual, and I went to 7 bar, which is a higher pressure, which might have just squeezed it out faster. But the difference here is when I went to flow, I went to 2 mils per second, and then I ended up actually at, you can zoom, at about 2.6 mils. Okay. And what's interesting about doing this with manual is I was quickly able to decide what flow rate got me the kind of pressure I wanted. And then I was really stable. I was, what is that? 8 to 9.5 bar is where I was. Okay. So what I could do is go back to the blooming espresso at this point and just change the exit, the last flow stage, instead of being 2.2 mils per second, change it to 2.6 mils per second. And that would give me the kind of pressure I want. It's not, the flow rate's totally fine. I'm still in a very happy flow rate. So that would be a way to use the manual mode to try and decide how you want to program it. Like people have asked. Now, another question I got today on Diaspora was, can you convert a manual shot to an automated shot? The answer is no, and the reason is right in front of you. Who would want to convert this jittery mess into a program, right? this needs a bit of cleaning up. Now, if this beginning part was good, well, you could just set the exit trigger to 7 bar, and that would have been fully automatic. But this part here is a jittery mess, and we can see that 2 mils per second at the start was not enough. So I wouldn't want to copy that, whereas 2.6 was just bang on. So what I would do is, if I want to copy this shot, if it tastes really good, is just pull up Blooming, change the last stage from 2.2 to 2.6, and it's going to be a cleaner version of what I just did. So that gives you an idea of what a manual control on the 1.3 looks like. And not many people are doing that yet, right? We just come out with it. I only have one video really that shows you how to control this, and I haven't made any coffees in any videos using manual control. But it's super interesting just to see what you can do. And it might be that the interaction between manual to figure out what might work, and then programmed to repeat it in a more reliable way is actually the best way to make coffee. That's my hunch. Thank you guys.
Can I ask a total non sequitur question, maybe John and Ben? Steam wand, were you guys looking at, I think you mentioned something about building a vacuum breaker onto it. Is that something that you're looking into still, or is there timing happening on that, or anything?
Ben Champion, are you on the call? All right, Ben's got kids, so I'll answer. So the current issue with the steam is that we, at the end of steaming, flush, and that's to push any milk out, okay? And that's because, through experience, if you stop the milk steaming and let milk sit, it will suck in here very quickly, and after, like, fast, I mean like 1 minute, you will have milk in your boiler, and your boiler is now smelling like burnt milk forever. And that's an expensive mistake to do. So we've got that there. Now, that's a problem with any espresso machine, that if you're putting steam through a tube, as the steam cools, it's going to suck back in. The way traditional machines solve that is they put a one-way valve on there, so that steam can only go forward on that, right? Unfortunately, because of our design, we can't do that. And the reason is that traditional machines weld all their connectors. So from the boiler to the steam is all welded. So that if you're breaking vacuum here, then what happens is between the vacuum break and the boiler, that hot air is going to cool and is going to cause a partial vacuum, which is going to pull on things. If everything's welded, doesn't matter. But in our case, we didn't like welded for a lot of reasons, not least of which thermal cycling tends to make them leak. Also, it's metal, so you have poor thermal stability during your espresso. So we went to all solid Teflon tubes and using O-rings to do our, I realize I'm going information overload. We use a different approach to sealing everything in a way that doesn't leak. That means that we're nervous about causing a partial vacuum between the heater and the steam wand. So we could use an off-the-shelf breaker there, but we think that the O-ring, which normally is pushed, like water is usually flowing toward the steam wand, and that O-ring is pushed hard. If we're now pulling on that after each steaming, we think we're more likely to cause a leak. So that makes us nervous. What we have built, but it's expensive, is a little box with 2 vacuum breakers and atmosphere, so that it breaks here, and then internally it breaks it as well there. And that's something that's coming, but right now that costs us about 80 US to make, which makes it not very practical. Well, we're using Lee one-way valves, which are the same fighter jet, basically, technology. We're using our flow constrictor, and the whole thing is in a housing that's Ultim. And so there's a bunch of parts in there. It's expensive. I mean, obviously, if we made it in quantity, we could probably get it down to 30 or 40. It's still way too expensive to for just a throwaway. So we're working on that, but it's not going to happen in the next year. It's not. We haven't found a way to make it cheaper yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Is there also a problem with, like, if you've got the vacuum breaker inside the machine, do you then have problems with like condensation and stuff like that getting out into the internals of the machine?
Yeah, you have to tube the vacuum breaker out
and
to
have
the
it
tank.
drain off. Yeah.
Yeah, now a lot of traditional machines, if you look inside them, you see a lot of calcification on the inside because they're made to just dribble. And the reason they're made that way is because people use them as cup warmers. And so they have to plan on people putting wet cups on the top and water dripping through. And then they just vaporize it, and there's a bunch of crusty salts everywhere. And they're okay with the crusty salts. We are also okay with crusty salts because we've had to, for safety compliance, be able to have water spurt all over the inside without causing any damage. But I don't like the general approach of having water flash to steam on the inside of the machine. I think that's probably not good for PCBs and such.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we'll find a solution there, but unfortunately it's not off the shelf because we steam like no one else does.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that's just extraordinary about this machine. It's like you look at it from the outside, and it's got that sort of design language of, you know, it's a box with a group head that pokes out and a steam one that pokes out. But actually, what's going on inside is just like, it's just so different, and it's got so much thought. Where, you know, like you guys have had to think about like everything from the ground up. It's just like the amount of thought and effort that goes into it is just like, it's pretty staggering. And it's kind of, it's a bit, I feel it's a bit kind of disappointing that it's very hard for people to appreciate all of the work and thought that's gone into it.
Yeah, I always thought our steam was like the Slayer steam. I mean, because I read their press releases about superheated steam, and I think there is similarity with that model. But when I use the Slayer steam, I was surprised that they don't have a fast off. That when you stop the Slayer steam, it goes I think that's because they didn't confront the problem that we've had to confront with the vacuum brake and a valve, and instead they shut the steam off at the boiler and let all the steam just keep going out at the steam wand. And that's a solution.
If they've got the big loop steam wand, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, whereas LM, at least, like they always had like the on the FB80 and the like the GB5 and like all of them, they've got the super short linear wand. It's like this wand, this far, and then you're back to the valve, and then you've got the internal mini vacuum breaker right on the other side. Whereas then, you know, the Kinesso and the GS3 and like all of them, you've got this massive loop. It's like 90 mils in it or something like that.
Sorry, I just muted Terry. What else do I have? Oh, I have some questions here. Okay, there's feeding beans. Oh yeah, so another question, which is, what about the pour-over basket? Is it better than a V60? People will have to opine on that. What I've seen on Diaspora is people are finding that the pour-overs they're making with the Decent are better than the ones they make with the V60. That was certainly Scott Rayo's understanding. In other words, the profile he made on the Decent makes better pour-overs than he makes. And the reason is that pour-overs are really incredibly hard to do because you want to get all the hot water on the beans at the beginning as fast as possible without causing any channels and with causing just the appropriate amount of churn and turbulence. Too much turbulence and the water goes straight down, not enough turbulence and you're not using all the beans. And if you are like a lot of pour-over people doing this, a motion that involves height, then you're not making a good V60 because you're altering the turbulence by changing the height. So a really good V60 would be always at the same height and at the optimal height, whatever that might be. So what is interesting about the V60 program on on the Decent is that we've calibrated the water sprays so that they go to the right depth and they don't channel through, but they aren't so weak that they don't stir the slurry enough. So your chances of making a really good V60 are slim, repeatable, even harder. Better to just have, it was probably a year and a half that Rayo worked on these damn V60s. And we had so many iterations of these baskets and the holes. We actually didn't know that we'd ever get out of that. So yes, and in fact, what we're finding is cafes who would not consider our espresso machine because it's too non-traditional are buying them to make V60s, because V60s are a staff time suck and they're inconsistent. So they're just putting those machines in with V60s. We have a really funny looking draft of our machine with legs that are about this tall, so that you could put a much larger V60 underneath it. Because we're hoping that when we come out with the larger water heaters on a 220 line, that we'll be able to batch brew. So, but we cannot batch brew currently because we don't have the electric power to heat that much water at the right temperature.
John, what about the tank preheat though? Does that just not?
So the tank preheat just is not going to be good enough for a commercial environment because they're going to be going through a liter like every few minutes, and they're not going to wait for it to preheat. The very latest firmware, most of you guys I think are 1.1 machines, has some nice features for tank preheating. So first of all, we optimized it. Previously it was not. And so the tank preheating is about twice as fast. So you're looking at like 9 minutes to preheat your 2 liters to the absolute highest temperature, and only a few minutes otherwise. Also, previously, if you had a recipe that used tank preheating, it would make you wait before you could make coffee. And now if you hit the start button, it'll interrupt the tank preheating and do its best attempt at that time.
Which tank are you talking about when you say the tank preheating? Is it the main ceramic tank at the bottom?
Yeah. So the main ceramic tank that holds 2 liters of water is normally room temperature, but there are a few recipes that need very high flow rate at more than we can deliver in temperature. Okay, that's only pour overs. Some people have wanted to do 12 milliliters per second to, we call it a water hammer, but not a lot of people want to do that. The more common case is to be able to do a 3 or 4 cup V60. And what Rayo is telling me is we need to hit flow rates in the 10 to 12 mils per second rate to do that. But currently, if you want to do, I think the fastest flow rate you can do, people can correct me, is 6 mils per second on the V60 recipe without at some point dipping in temperature, unless you preheat the tank. If you preheat the tank, it can go to 8 mils per second to the whole recipe. But you got to wait 9 minutes for the tank to preheat.
So if you're making something like tea or a long black, I imagine you don't need to use tank preheating. You just request the temperature you want, and the machine will dispense it at whatever flow rate it can achieve to get that temperature.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. It's just that the maximum flow rate it's going to do is 6 mils per second to make tea or a long black. So if you're looking, for example, to add 200 mils of water, you're looking at 30 seconds to do so. But it will hit that temperature. Also, the new firmware will go to, I think, 100 Celsius or 995. The current firmware max is at 98, I believe. So a little bit higher temperature boost for, again, it's just because we could not imagine anyone wanting to throw 100-degree water on espresso beans, so we didn't do that. But now that people make pour overs, they want that. So you can do it. I also want someone, please, to experiment with cold brew, because the firmware lets you do that now, and no one's done it.
I've got a friend who loves cold brew, so once I get the machine, and if he's allowed around to my house at that point in time, with all the rules changing, but yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Can we change the flow rate on the hot water dispensing?
Not currently. Not currently. And one of the things that will hopefully come out so we actually we dialed back from the maximum. So it could go, I think it's doing 6. We could actually go higher and then actually slow it down if we're not able to hit the heat, right? So, so if you said you wanted 90 Celsius, we could start at 10 mils per second and then go down to 6 or 4 as you wanted more water, and we couldn't do it. So programming wise, we could totally do that. It's just a to-do. And the other thing is we do have some vibration dampeners on some test machines, and the effect on the hot water spigot is dramatic. It no longer is jittery, it's just a constant stream. And that means that if we increase the flow rate, you don't increase the splashing. Because right now, if you increase the flow rate on the jitter, you just splash coffee everywhere. The problem is the off-the-shelf vibration dampeners are 2 pieces of rubber, and they're good for about 1,000 shots, and then they break. So like everything else, we have to make our own. So we haven't even got a prototype for that. I mean, it's really cool to see the vibration dampener do great things, but 1,000 shot lifetime is not going to be acceptable to anybody.
It's not going to fly.
I mean, you find them on some capsule machines. Jura has them.
Yeah.
But you also find that the part is widely available in the aftermarket for repairs.
Yeah, widely available.
And is Jura's rubber as well, or do they have?
Yeah, they're all rubber.
Yeah, they're all rubber.
All of them are rubber. They're like $1 to make. I mean, they're so simple.
And we don't like rubber because it doesn't last.
No, we've had actually Ben had his die, but quickly.
If I could make it out of ceramic.
Yeah. Nanotech.
Your metal, actually metal.
Yeah. We're hoping to make it out of metal with a spring.
Like a speaker.
But then we've got, lots of issues.
Like a speaker, though. We could do it as a...
Like a speaker.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah. What all the mold cost on that is.
You might be able to give me some feedback here, John. I've only been to America once, and that was last year, and it was for Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. I was in San Jose for a week, and being from Melbourne, everybody who's never been to America just gives me the standard catch cry of, you won't get a decent coffee in America. So I said, I'm sure it can be done. I'm not going to walk into a Starbucks because we've got Starbucks over here, and I don't like the coffee that they make here. But anyway.
There's lots of good coffee. I mean, it depends on where you are. Obviously, there's trendiness. Bugs and I have been, you go to Berlin and you go, oh my God, you can't get good coffee in Berlin. And it's true, like 95% of the coffee in Berlin is horrible. And you go most of the third wave places and it's all underdeveloped acid. And then you find like 2 really fantastic places in Berlin. And that's probably all there are. And
I think people forget you can get terrible quality coffee in Melbourne as well. There's
mostly. We went at my school, went to places that I won't mention, but there was a reason we kept going back to Saint Ali because the coffee was really good there.
Really good.
What happened to me? I got a terrible coffee the first morning in my hotel, which I expected because I've never had a good coffee in a hotel. And I walked out with a queue that was coming out the door, which is generally a good indication that it's a good thing. And it turned out to be a Pete's coffee. So I don't know if you've got them. It was in California, but they only do pour over. So I walk in and ask for a latte, and they look at me like I'm an alien and said, no, we don't do lattes here. So they gave me this sweet and creamy pour over, and it was an interesting drink, and it was very nice. And I went back every day and lined up in that bloody queue to get a coffee because it was the best way to have a caffeine thing. And yet when you're in another country, you don't have to have the latte that you have in Melbourne every day. You try something different. My very long-winded question is, do you know, is Pete's coffee a good example of a pour over coffee? Because I found that quite good. And if that's something that yeah, once we get the decent, we can try messing around with and get something.
So that is an anomaly. That is super weird because Pete's is actually an offshoot of Starbucks. So the Pete's people were the people who were fired from Starbucks, or basically I think they quit Starbucks and then the original guy was left behind. And Pete's was famous for ultra burnt coffee. I mean, just like worse than Starbucks, really, really burnt. I know the original Pete's in Berkeley, California. And it sounds to me like what's happened is that they've decided to make a non-espresso bar, a pour-over bar, and actually focus on quality and abandon their let's make Italian coffee ethos, which is great. I'm very happy to hear that they're doing that. They probably decided they had to do something to compete with Starbucks, and quality was it.
Well, it's very hard to tell because there's so much masking the flavor. Once I think even milk in Australia, you call it different things in America. So I don't know what I'm getting. And you add cream to coffee, but I never hear of anybody adding milk to coffee. So it's confusing. But the sweet and creamy that they made me, the first time she said, "Do you want any sugar?" And she pulls out this tablespoon, and I said, "Actually, I think I'll just try it with no sugar, thank you." And it still tasted like a coffee with a couple of teaspoons of sugar in it to me.
So the reason there is that most milk in America is from cows raised on soybeans and corn.
Sweet corn.
And so you've got sugar, bad sugar. So if you're in America, you've got to look for grass milk, unless
I can't drink it.
the stuff it tastes like corn syrup. The milk in America tastes like corn syrup. And having lived in France, where they have no idea what any coffee of the rest of the world is supposed to be. I mean, they call it café crème, has milk in it. Okay, it's not cream. It's with milk. Okay, so you tell people I want an espresso if you're in there, and give me a little bit of milk on the side, hot, please. And they're like, okay, and then you get the coffee you want. So just DIY it wherever you go in America. Just tell them.
And try and get grass-fed milk.
Yeah, tell them milk in the cup separately, please, no sugar, and I'll make it myself. Thank you. Actually, some hot water too would be nice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
At the end of the day, we should play around with pour over coffee. Is that what you're saying?
I've got a bunch of questions from Thierry, and Thierry, why don't we just talk separately? There's also a whole lot of questions about grinders, and one of the things we did on the first call that I thought was great is the two of us went away and just let you guys talk. So I cannot talk about the Max or any of these other grinders, and so my preference is in about 10 minutes, we'll have been 2 hours. And I'm going to go away and just leave this call open. So all this talk that you guys have about grinders, please run with it. So actually, Ed asks a question about, so he says, with the new firmware that gives more accurate flow calculations, can you make a flow profile from the results of a pressure profile and get the original pressure behavior back when you run the flow profile? So I would expect yes, but that's a good question. So the issue is, let's say you do a pressure profile at 9 bar and it gives you 2 mils per second at the start and 3 mils per second at the end. You should be able to then make a flow profile that does 2 mils at the start and 3 at the end and gives you similar pressure. That's the theory. The question will be, when we do that, do small differences between the puck cause the flow to have a huge effect? Because, pressure rises to the square of flow. And so small changes in flow will have huge changes in pressure. So that is unknown, Ed, and to be done, and sounds like a great topic on diaspora. It also, when we launched the D1, a lot of people were interested. Scott and Hoffman were both interested in flow profiling exclusively as a way to make the worst coffees better. And because no one had flow profiling, so they assumed that that was what it was going to be useful for. And very quickly, we all learned with this machine that the best coffees had the right flow and the right pressure in the range that you want. So that has diminished interest in flow profiling because people are no longer interested in making kind of not so bad espresso. It's like they would like to actually make pretty good ones, and the machine's quite good at making those. So now flow profiling is really used in just 2 cases, largely, where So pre-infusion, always, because the puck creates no pressure. So everything we do there is flow. And then the few cases where you want flow because it repairs channeling automatically. Okay, so if you have a channel when you're flow profiling, the flow goes up, and so the pump automatically backs off to bring the flow down, which then lets the channel heal. With pressure profiling, you have the opposite effect. Pressure drops, so flow goes up, which aggravates the pressure. We have some firmware logic to try and deal with that, but it works much better with flow profiling. So that's why Rayo put a flow profile at the end of blooming, was because with light roast, they're very prone to channeling, and he liked the fact that there was channel healing at the end of blooming. It's also why with like the allongé, we're doing a flow profile instead of a pressure profile, because we're going so fast, we're definitely creating channels. And if we were pressure profiling, we'd aggravate it, it would taste much worse. So, okay. No, I haven't looked at soberthane. You'd have to ask Ben. I don't even know what that is. So I can't comment. I'll just say on some of our materials choices like gaskets and O-rings, we just are very conservative. So all the internal O-rings are all the internal, everything is silicone. It's just food grade silicone because we didn't want to play with anything else. And then the gasket is NBR rubber because I looked at a catalog of professional Italian espresso machines and they were all NBR rubber. So that's why we're not a silicone gasket there. I figured we already innovated our way to a high-risk machine as it was. Let's make safe material choices. Got 5 minutes left. Does it make flow profiling easier and more reproducible? No. Flow profiling is still hard. Because small changes in the puck prep are going to yield big differences in pressure. So one of the things that is a feature to come, isn't there yet, is to have a flow profile with a pressure ceiling. So you can say, I want to get 2 mils per second, but don't go over 9 bar. Today you can do that with an advanced shot. You do an exit trigger, and then you continue with pressure profiling. But this will be a cleaner way to do the same thing. And then we'll see if people can do interesting things with flow profiled shots. I'll also mention that, when I came looking at this as lever shots make the best espressos. So pressure goes up and then pressure goes down in order to compensate for the accelerating flow. So you back off on pressure so that your shot doesn't run away. That's how, for example, the default shot looks like. But now in the 4 years of using my machine, I realized that accelerating flow is not to be completely stamped out. So having a flow profile that's 2 mils per second straight out leads to a extreme pressure crash with light roasts and isn't necessarily the best thing. So, the 3 steps in our shots are pre-infusion, hold, and decline. But it turns out with that last stage decline, you can actually have it ascend instead of declining. I just had this assumption that declining was what we all wanted. I haven't published new profiles there because, frankly, I am no longer the expert on making good coffee with this machine. I was when no one else ever had the machine, and I had 2 years with it. That made me the expert to make the recipes. But since I'm no longer the best person to make recipes, you guys are, Rayo is, some other people, I have the last 2 years published recipes other people have done or the community's created or people like Damien have created. So I feel like there is a place for a flow profile recipe that ascends rather than descends. And it just hasn't been created yet. But I think that will make better coffee than like the flow profile for milky drinks, which is a flat 2.2 or 2.4 mils per second. If I were to do that now, I would probably make that go from 2.2 to 3. Okay, I'm gonna plug the laptop in and walk away. I think Luca is petered out. You've got 3 minutes maybe of Luca's brain power to tell you about the monolith and the max. And then the rest of you, I will kill the call in an hour if you guys are still talking, but I doubt it. So
Yeah.
thanks, everyone.
See,
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been playing around with the, I think I've posted about it on the diaspora, but I've been playing around with the increasing flow rate shot by taking the blooming profile and increasing the time on the ramp stage out to like, 15, 20 seconds. Yeah, so, and that's quite an interesting one because what it does is to drop the pressure peak, and it also, so you end up with a lower pressure, a lower maximum pressure, and you also end up with a lower pressure drop off towards the end. Now, whether or not it's good or not, I don't know. But I've been doing it. So something we can play around with.
Luca, that coffee you tried making earlier that was really light, the hand-picked one that you described, was that the lightest roast you've tried to make espresso with, or have you used lighter ones than that? Because you were commenting that it was very, very light.
I think I've used very, very light coffees. I've probably tried lighter roasts than that. Not always successfully. I think that the biggest tip I would have is if you're going to use light roast coffees and you want to grab a filter roast that's, super aromatic or whatever, there's two things that have really helped quite a lot. I think one of them is I've sort of got a club of, friends who are just kind of like interested in learning about everything. And we exchange a lot of coffee samples. And we just buy lots of coffee from everyone all over the place, and we just, we sort of share it around. We Ziploc bag it up, we vacuum seal it, whatever. We throw it into the freezer until we've got time to see each other. And that's a good way to economically try through a lot of the roasters that are sort of, well regarded and high profile and everything around the world. But what we have noticed is that occasionally we'll get a coffee that's super light and totally unsuitable. We might go, it's total write-off. It just tastes like lemon juice. It's got no aroma. It's got no flavor. It's underdeveloped. And it'll hang out in the freezer, and then we'll come back to it 9 months later or something. And we'll just go, oh, okay, we'll give it a shot. Pre-COVID-19, we would do a lot of traditional coffee cupping and stuff like that. And every time I do something like that, I always like to have lots of random controls and things like that in there. Like you duplicate the cup or you throw in something that is crap or whatever, so that you keep yourselves on your toes. And so, like, I would often throw in these like old crappy coffees that we thought were terrible. And occasionally we'd find that the super old ones that had sat forever in the freezer and were underdeveloped would just develop the most insanely clear aromas ever. So, if you've got a coffee that is too light and you feel it's underdeveloped and you turf it out anyway, throw it in the freezer, come back to it a little bit later, it might surprise you.
Oh, wow.
That's one tip.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. I wouldn't have thought just putting it in a bag and put it in the freezer would have made it usable down the road.
When it's thawing out?
Sorry, that was David. Do I get condensation when it's throwing out was the question. Is that it?
Thawing out. As in when you freeze it, yeah.
Maybe. I've just chucked it straight through the grinder from frozen. It's fine. I think Chris Hendon wrote a paper on the effect of, particle size distribution of grinding from frozen. But a lot of some of the grinder manufacturers are recommending the, what is it, the Reese or the Ross droplet technique, where you spritz the coffee with liquid to remove the static before it goes through. And so, and that's really weird because like a lot of the grinder burrs are made from like, you know, D2 tool steel or whatever, which is not a stainless steel. Like it's a carbon steel, and they're okay with us putting water through it. So
yeah, I think Niche actually came out and said, do not spritz your coffee beans before you put them through the niche. We didn't test it or design it to do that, and they just don't recommend it.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, some other manufacturers will go, you know, they might have like a titanium nitride or I think zirconium nitride's another, you know, the new hotness coating or something like that. And maybe that, you know, gives some water resistance, but those coatings wear off. It's like half of the time you try and find your 0 point on your burrs, and then you end up shredding the coating off parts of the burrs. So I do not know what to tell you. I'm spraying mine. I'm grinding from frozen. At some stage, there'll be a cloud of smoke, and you know, you won't hear from me anymore. I don't know what to tell you. The other point, just for you, Alan, that I was going to say is, of course, the lighter you go, the more acidity you have. Lots of people hate acidity. I don't like acidity. I tolerate it if I have to tolerate it to get more aroma and flavor. Water makes quite a big difference to acidity. If you don't have enough carbonate in your water, which I don't because mine is soft, supplement with it. You can, most of the guides about supplementing your water and manipulating your water have you start with distilled water and then go up to, you know, what you want. That is the most intellectually lazy approach you can take. Just work out what water you've got and supplement the difference if you're too low. And if it's too high, then you can take what you've got and dilute it with distilled water so that you're using, you know, much
And you can get it to where you need it to go.
Water. Yeah. So I've got a bottle of potassium. I always get this wrong. Is it bicarbonate, the HCO3?
Yeah. So that's a hardness solution, right?
Correct. Yeah. So this is hardness only. I'm not doing the minerals, the minerals
solution.
Yeah, like I'm not doing the what are they called? The diprotic cations, the magnesium and the carbon, the calcium. I'm not supplementing that. I'm just supplementing the anion to, you know, sort of like scavenge some of the protons. And that, I find that makes a pretty tasteable difference and helps quite a bit with light roasts. So those are two pointers that I have that are nothing to do with any setting on the machines.
No,
so
that's
what
great
anyone was
advice,
looking
though.
for. Yeah.
I mean, I've been playing around with the Barista Hustle water recipes just out of curiosity because it's kind of fun, you know. So I've been buying distilled water and but I haven't done enough testing with it to really know the difference. It's more just playing around and trying it out. And some of it's also trying to avoid putting too much. We've got really hard water here in Austin, Texas. I mean, Austin was basically built on a limestone field for the most part. So it's another way to try to establish some control over the water going in. But when I first got the Decent, all I had was water coming out of my Brita, you know, water filter that I keep in the fridge. And it wasn't like it was terrible, but again, I'm trying to experiment with these different ways to see if it affects the flavor in the cup.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got, you know, a nice amount of carbonate in the water and like calcium carbonate, you should be able to get some, you know, really delicious coffee, and you might be able to use, you know, some lighter coffee than you could otherwise get away with if you're in a soft water area. Ironically, in Melbourne, there are a lot of roasters that want to sort of roast lighter and lighter. But we've got the worst water in the world to do that. We've just got, you know, we've got like no carbonate. It's just punishing. So yeah, terrible, terrible, coincidence there. I've probably waffled on enough, so I might pop on mute if someone else has anything they want to say or whatever.
Hey guys, Jeremy from Singapore here. I'd like to just ask you guys, how often do you really take out your group head gasket to clean it? Because I just got my machine and I was thinking when can I put it off until? Yeah.
I clean mine every week, probably sometimes every 3 or 4 days even. I wipe around the gasket with a cloth every time I make a shot, and if it doesn't come out clean after a couple of wipes around, I feel that's a good time to pull the gasket out and clean it. The last thing I want is coffee going rancid up in the gasket, and the longer you leave it too, it'll start gluing your gasket to the housing, so it makes it harder for the gasket to come out as well. So if you pull your gasket out every day, you take it out quite easily. You leave it in for 3 or 4 days, you'll find it's harder to get out. So anyway, that's the way I leave it. Yeah.
Damien, do you have any tips on how to pull the gasket out? Like, do you use like a pick or a screwdriver or something?
Yeah, I've got a metal skewer that I use. I'm using it for stirring for the one on the ends. But to get the gasket out, if I take the screen out first and the lower brass, which will fall out quite easily, you've got. But I've got a version 1 group head too, version 1.0. The newer group heads, I think the brass might come down a bit further. But anyway, with mine, when I take the lower brass out, you've got maybe 4 mil or so of gasket around the inside, so you get a good grip on the inside edge of the gasket to pull it down. Now, what I find is if I work around the gasket and lower it little bit by little bit, it'll come out without breaking the gasket or a lot easier. If you just pull on the one spot, the other side of the gasket will be tight, and you're likely to find it harder to get out or even rip the gasket. Whereas if you switch it off around and work your way around, you develop a technique and it comes out quite easy, I find. But removing that bottom brass is a big help. That makes it heaps easier.
Yeah. So I've ordered those dental tools that John was recommending. So I'm going to try it out later. I just wanted to ask to see whether there was any taste difference, because I used to not clean my machine so regularly, so that could be contributing to some of the off flavors maybe that I feel. And I can't really compare coffees until I'm sure of that. So my question is, do you guys really taste the difference if you don't clean it for a week or 2?
I can't say that I taste the difference. But then again, I don't let it go that long to say that I can compare.
Okay. I guess I'll try cleaning it every week or so and see whether I can taste it.
Yeah.
And keep everything else the same. Yeah.
One of the reasons I clean so frequently is if you take out the shower screen, you'll notice a lot of silt, the coffee grind silt will sit on top of the screen. And when you flush the group head, it doesn't clean that off. And that accumulates over time. So I don't taste the difference, but I always like to make sure everything's clean, particularly if I'm going to test a new coffee. Say if I roast a coffee and I want to try the straight coffee, because I don't drink straight coffee. I drink milk coffee or milk coffee flavored coffee is what I call it, rather than drinking coffee. But I taste a lot of coffee to learn how my roasting went, or to find unique flavors in coffees. So if I was going to blend 2 coffees, I'd taste them straight first. I might do espresso, I might do a low pressure, depending if it's. A lot of coffee drinkers like the acidity taste. I hate it. So I'll lower pressure or use different temperatures to get the acidity. That barista water you were talking about earlier, I'll put in that the bicarbonate later to reduce acidity. to taste it, but otherwise I don't use carbonated water because milk will reduce acidity, and that's why I drink coffee. So a lot of the tasting is, and my brewing and everything else, when I'm doing that, I make sure the clean is, everything is spotless clean, because I don't want to influence anything into that. But as far as making my latte, I don't think I'd taste any difference if I didn't clean it for a month. But I have this mental image as well. I don't want to be drinking fungus or bacteria stuff that's going off and moldy stuff. You don't put
I just can't see myself cleaning it every week. Yeah.
You clean your dinner plate every
Damien,
day.
it sounds like Damien, it sounds like it's a good idea just from a maintenance standpoint, because it sounds like the gasket in there can get, you're saying it can get kind of gummed up if you don't routinely take it out and clean it.
Yeah, your gasket will actually get a coating on it, a coffee coating, and it'll go hard. So when you, with the temperature, it'll go hard, and you'll start getting leaks down the side of your portafilter. You'll get a few drops and stuff. And I find this machine's quite prone to doing that, getting leaks over the side. And if you keep the gasket out, keep taking it out and cleaning it and clean that coffee film off, I find I don't have a leaking problem near as often.
That's good advice.
I'll probably clean it once a week for a couple of months, and I'll let you know how it tastes like to me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Damon and Martin. Yeah.
Hey, Damien, this is about as off topic as it gets, but my kids want to know the name of your eclectus parrot.
His name's Joey, but I call him Budgie. He's just a big budgie.
He was definitely the show in your demonstration the other week, so they were very excited to see him getting in there.
Okay, I'll go get him if your kids are there, and they can have a look.
Oh,
That's Joey. He can get pretty noisy. You say hello, Joe? Hello.
Hello.
It's all new to him. He's big on calls going on. Just say hello. No, he's not going to say hello.
He certainly seems to like the camera.
Yeah, he likes the attention.
how old is he?
He's about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's about 6-year-old, but they live about 80 years or so, so you're allowed.
Yeah, my mother has a parrot that's probably going to outlive her that hates me, and I'm hoping I don't inherit it. She ultimately does.
Nobody wants to inherit him. He gets too noisy when there's when people come to visit, or there's a lot of things going on that he's not normal, like he's not used to. He starts getting noisy and calling for attention and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, I've got fish and dogs and birds and all sorts of things. I like my pets.
You'll have to show us the fish tank next time. I'm just going to run because I've had a lot of coffee and nature calls. See you guys.
Yeah.
Take care, Luca.
I think I'm going to jump out too. I think by the time we do this again, I might actually have a machine. So UPS says it'll be here on Thursday. So planning on not getting a lot of work done on Friday.
Yeah.
You're going to love it.
I think I will. It's it's at the moment it's a bit of a coin flip whether I get a decent coffee, and I only have 2 a day. So it's really disappointing when your machine's just spitting out bad coffee. So I'm sure I'll make a few bad ones with the decent though as well. It's bound to happen.
But you'll have fun doing it.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll see you guys again.
I got to sign off too. It's almost 10:15 here in Texas. Time for me to go pass out.